Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Lynette Tamim and these are today's top stories. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat welcomes MP Michel Aoun's logic in running for president, although the matter has not been discussed between them. Speaker Nabih Berri stresses there are no under-the-table negotiations over extending Parliament's term. And the United Nations, Israel and the Palestinian Authority reach a trilateral agreement on aid to reconstruct the Gaza Strip. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat says he agrees with MP Michel Aoun's logic in running for the presidency, but stresses their meeting did not include discussions on the matter. Following a meeting with the Free Patriotic Movement leader in Clemenceau, Jumblat added there was an agreement on the majority of points and the coordination between us will continue. Aoun also confirmed that the meeting excluded any dialogue about presidential elections, but stressed that a common view was shared on most other matters of discussion. Jumblat agreed with the view on the international coalition against ISIS that the FPM leader expressed in a televised interview last night. Aoun has said he did not believe in a coalition that excluded countries, including Syria, that were suffering from terrorism. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri reiterates there are no under-the-table deals regarding the controversial issue of extending the Parliament's term. During his weekly meeting with lawmakers in his Ainatine residence, Berri said, "We only work above the table." He refused the extension of the Parliament's term, expressing some hope over the candidacy submitted in that regard. Berri pointed to some positive indicators that could herald an agreement among political blocs to hold a legislative session. The legislative session should address a number of pressing economic and financial issues, including the controversial wage scale, the salaries of the public sector employees, the fiscal budget, and Eurobonds. Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnouk has closed the nomination period for the parliamentary elections and announced that the vote will be held on November 16th. The announcement was made despite widespread doubts over whether holding a vote in November will be possible due to security concerns and the ongoing presidential vacuum. 514 Lebanese individuals, including 35 women, have submitted their candidacies for the polls. The Interior Minister also said that for the first time, expat votes will be introduced in a Lebanese election. Meanwhile, security agencies are preparing a report on the feasibility of holding elections in the current political climate. Settling into his new role as Lebanon's Grand Mufti, Sheikh Abdellatif Daryan has held a handover ceremony with his predecessor, Sheikh Mohammed Kabbani, at Dar al-Fatwa, and dispatched a delegation to meet with the families of Lebanese soldiers and policemen who were being held hostage. The new Grand Mufti dispatched a delegation headed by Sheikh Abdurrahman Sharkiye to protest site in Martyrs Square in downtown Beirut this morning to convey Daryan's concerns over the Lebanese hostage crisis. Prime Minister Tamam Slam has underlined the need for a joint UN-Lebanon action to deal with the Syrian refugee crisis. Salam headed a ministerial committee at the Grand Servais in downtown Beirut with senior officials from the United Nations, including UNDP Administrator Helen Clark and UN High Commissioner for Refugees Antonio Guterres.
We're here because of the exceptional circumstances in which Lebanon finds itself today, bearing the greatest refugee burden per capita of any country in the world, and our concern to address how Lebanon can best deal with this situation.
And working on the ground, our staff could see not only the enormous impact on the schools, on the hospitals, on the water, on the electricity, on the infrastructure, but also see Lebanese families seeing their income from salaries being put into question, with less jobs, also with rents going up, having more and more difficult to make ends meet. But the voice of Helen Clark and the voice of UNDP is absolutely essential to make the international community understand that Lebanon needs and deserves massive financial assistance to be able to cope with this challenge and for its population not to suffer so much with the presence of so many refugees. And there is another form of solidarity that needs to be expressed with Lebanon. it's through other countries in the world receiving more Syrian refugees. And we have been strongly appealing for Europe, for the Gulf, for an enlarged area, for governments to accept the need to share the burden and to have more refugees coming legally into their countries.
U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon, Mr. David Hale, says Washington is ready to meet the needs of the Lebanese army immediately. His remarks came during a meeting with Defense Minister Samir Muqbil. Muqbil, for his part, reiterated his gratitude to the U.S. for its support for arming the Lebanese army at this critical stage the country and the region is going through. Hale also met with Foreign Minister Gibran Bassil. No statements were made following the meeting. Armed militants have kidnapped a Lebanese soldier from his farm in the Wadi Hamid area outside of Arsal. The National News Agency identified the soldier as Kamal Mohammed Khalil al-Hujairi. No details are made available for the moment. U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel and top U.S. General Martin Dempsey say the United States is not preparing to unleash a shock and awe campaign of overwhelming airstrikes in Syria against Islamic State fighters. Speaking before Congress, the officials said they will support moderate opposition within Syria instead. Obama has pledged to expand American efforts, and U.S. diplomats are rushing to put together an international coalition for a relentless campaign against the Islamic State.
All four elements of this strategy require a significant commitment of resources on the part of the United States and our coalition partners. Mr. Chairman, I think everyone on this committee understands fully this will not be an easy or a brief effort. It is complicated. We're at war with ISIL as we are with al-Qaeda. But destroying ISIL will require more than military efforts alone. It will require political progress in the region and effective partners on the ground in Iraq and Syria. As the Congress and the administration work together, we know this effort will take time. The President has outlined a clear, comprehensive, and workable strategy to achieve our goals and protect our interests.
As long as ISIL enjoys a safe haven in Syria, it will remain a formidable force and a threat. So, while this work in Iraq is taking place, we will simultaneously pressure ISIL in Syria. With coalition partners and contributions, we will begin building a force of vetted, trained, moderate Syrians to take on ISIL in Syria. This won't look like a shock and awe campaign because that's simply not how ISIL is organized, but it will be a persistent and sustainable campaign. I want to emphasize that our military actions must be part of a whole-of-government effort that works to disrupt ISIL financing, interdict the movement of foreign fighters across borders, and undermine the ISIL message.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has met with Iraqi National Security Advisor Falih al-Fayyad in Damascus, the first such meeting since the U.S. started airstrikes in Iraq. The two reportedly agreed to strengthen cooperation in fighting terrorism. The U.S. has ruled out the Syrian regime and Iran as coalition partners in combating the Islamic State. And on the ground in Syria, at least 48 people, including rebel fighters, have been killed in Syrian government air bombardments around a town in the central province of Homs. Around a dozen fighters and multiple rebel commanders were also confirmed killed in the bombardment, which targeted Talbisi, a town north of the city of Homs. And coming up next, angry Ukrainian man grabbed a deputy and threw him in a rubbish bin. Stay with us. Welcome back. ISIS has issued a thinly veiled threat to the U.S., releasing a Hollywood-style trailer that appears to warn of attacks against American forces in light of President Barack Obama's pledge to degrade and destroy the terror group. The 52-second clip, the latest in a long line of well-produced propaganda videos, features slow-motion explosions and clips of attacks previously carried out against U.S. forces, including one of American soldiers carrying a wounded serviceman. Images of Obama and then the White House at dark flicker and flames appear to engulf U.S. troops. Flames of war fighting has just begun, flashes on the screen before it ends with the words, "Coming soon." The United Nations, Israel, and the Palestinian Authority have reached a trilateral agreement on the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip following Israel's recent 7-week offensive in Gaza. The UN has proposed an emergency donation totaling $550 million to rebuild the Palestinian enclave.
In this regard, I am pleased to announce to the Security Council that my office, UNSCO, has brokered a trilateral agreement between Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and the United Nations to enable work at the scale required in the Strip, involving the private sector in Gaza and giving a lead role to the Palestinian Authority in the reconstruction effort, while providing security assurances through UN monitoring that these materials will not be diverted from their entirely civilian purpose. Arriving at this agreement has not been without its challenges. We consider this temporary mechanism, which must get up and running without delay, as an important step towards the objective of lifting all remaining closures and a signal of hope to the people of Gaza.
U.S. President Barack Obama has unveiled a $500 million plan to combat the current outbreak of Ebola in West Africa, while warning that the epidemic is spiraling out of control. Obama, who has called the outbreak a national security crisis, has faced criticism for not doing more to stall the outbreak, which has killed more than 2,400 people, according to the World Health Organization.
Now, here's the hard truth. In West Africa, Ebola is now an epidemic of the likes that we have not seen before. It's spiraling out of control. It is getting worse. It's spreading faster and exponentially. Today, I'm announcing a major increase in our response. At the request of the Liberian government, we're going to establish a military command center in Liberia to support civilian efforts across the region, similar to our response after the Haiti earthquake. It's going to be commanded by Major General Darrell Williams, a commander of our armed Army forces in Africa. He just arrived today and is now on the ground in Liberia. And our forces are going to bring their expertise in command and control, in logistics, in engineering. And our Department of Defense is better at that. Our armed services is better at that than any organization on earth. We're going to create an air bridge to get health workers and medical supplies into West Africa faster. We're going to establish a staging area in Senegal to help distribute personnel and aid on the ground more quickly. We are going to create a new training site to train thousands of health workers so they can effectively and safely care for more patients. Personnel from the U.S. Public Health Service will deploy to the new field hospitals that we're setting up in Liberia. And USAID will join with international partners and local communities in a community care campaign to distribute supplies and information kits to hundreds of thousands of families so they can better protect themselves. We're also going to build additional treatment units, including new isolation spaces and more than 1,000 beds. And in all our efforts, the safety of our personnel will remain a top priority.
A group of angry men outside the Ukrainian parliament have grabbed a deputy and thrown him into a rubbish bin. Vitaly Zuravsky, once a member of former President Viktor Yanukovych's pro-Russian party, authored a bill in January severely tightening restrictions on anti-government protesters. The man held him down in the dumpster and poured water on him, as well as his briefcase and tires, hitting his face. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat welcomes MP Michel Aoun's logic in running for president, although the matter has not been discussed between them. Speaker Nabil Berri stresses there are no under-the-table negotiations over extending Parliament's term. And the United Nations, Israel and the Palestinian Authority reach a trilateral agreement on aid to reconstruct the Gaza Strip. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Sameen, wishing you all a very nice evening.